Depression and suicide run in my family. It's called generational depression and suicide. My grandmother died by suicide. My mother found her. My great aunt died by suicide. My mother and I found her. I was 4 years old. And I came close enough to dying by suicide that, I could tell you what the barrel of my gun tastes like. And I realized that I could speak on suicide prevention. So I figured the best way to rebrand from funny speaker to speaker who's funny was to do a TEDx talk. So I got the first one I applied for, which is, it just happened to be shortly after Robin Williams died. And they said, we'd like to have a comedian on the show talking about depression and suicide, but you have to mention Robin Williams, which I'd planned to do anyway. And so I did my first TEDx at 52. And because nobody that knew me knew I was depressed and having thoughts of suicide. My wife didn't know, my family didn't know. Matter of fact, when it posted on YouTube, my wife's about to hit play, and I said, look, before you hit play, I need to tell you about a half a dozen things you don't know about. And so that's how I came out as depressed and suicidal. And that was the beginning of my rebranding from, as I said, from funny speaker to speaker who's funny. And what I discovered in the preparation for the TED Talk was that nobody talks about depression and suicide. I mean, in the United States last year, 47,000 people died by suicide. That's 1 every 11 minutes, and hardly anybody's talking about it. The good news is, there are things you can do, there are things you can say, because 8 out of 10 people who are thinking about suicide are ambivalent. They want somebody to say or do something to stop them. And that's going to be the name of the book I'm writing, Start the Conversation on Suicide, Life in the Exit Row. Because I have something called chronic suicidality, which means for people like me, people in my tribe, the option of suicide is always on the menu as a solution for problems large and small. My car broke down a couple of years ago. I had 3 thoughts unbidden. 1, get it fixed. 2, buy a new. And 3, I could just kill myself. That's chronic suicidality. Almost every time I speak and I talk about chronic suicidality, after the presentation, one person, sometimes more than one, comes up and they have chronic suicidality and they did not know it had a name. They felt, because of the way they think, they're just freaks, and they felt very alone. And I had a young woman come up to me at a college event, and she said, I enjoyed your keynote, but I got to tell you, it made me weep. And I said, how did it make you weep? She goes, when you mentioned chronic suicidality and the story about your car, she goes, I've been having those same thoughts my entire life. I didn't know it had a name. I thought I was some kind of freak. And when I heard that you thought the same way, she goes, I realized for the first time in my life that I'm not alone, and I wept. And that's why I do what I do, is for people like that. And also for neuronormal people or neurotypical people who have difficulty wrapping their mind around depression, thoughts of suicide. Try to educate them. Because people ask me all the time, why did Anthony Bourdain and Kate Spade want to die? They had everything. Chances are they didn't want to die. Chances are they, like me, they just wanted to end the pain. So that's why I do what I do. And that's the ROI, the reward for me is people who come up afterwards. And maybe I've steered them just far enough off the path to suicide that they're going to live a normal life. I realized at some point that I'm like George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life, in that I'm shown over and over what people's lives would be like if I hadn't have been there to speak. So now I can't kill myself, because if I did, I'd take all those people with me.